Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to assemble the new 28mm or 156 scale plastic BM-13 Katyusha multiple rocket launcher made by Rubicon Models. The Katyusha rocket launcher, if it is indeed pronounced that way, was mounted on many different kinds of trucks, and in this case it's mounted on a Studebaker US6. The artwork on the front of the box is pretty cool and it depicts a Katyusha unleashing hell on some poor target. It also says that you can rotate and elevate the rocket launcher, build the model with or without the launcher itself, and that a driver is included. The back of the box has a few paragraphs on the history and usage of Katyushas during World War II, a simple painting guide using Vallejo acrylics, and an image of the included water slide decal sheet. The box looks pretty good. I do like the styling of Rubicon's boxes. They just look kind of fancy. What we're really interested in, of course, is what's inside the box. First, there's this set of instructions. I know I say it every time, but Rubicon's instruction booklets are very good. Here we can see an overview of the two models this kit can be used to make, and the sprues the parts come on. You can reference this if you think you're missing any parts. The instructions are clear and you shouldn't have any problem following them, especially if you pay attention to what you're doing. The instructions even remind you to pay attention. Something else I quite like is that the instructions for the rocket launcher frame, which could easily get confusing, have color coding to help you. That's a really nice, helpful touch. There are 3 sprues, individually wrapped in their own bag, and this cab part, which comes in its own bag, taped to a piece of cardboard. This separates it from the rest of the sprues, I assume to prevent damage. The cab is technically sprue A, according to the instructions. This part looks really nice and neat. The only area that really needs cleaning up is the sprue gate on the front. The round edges make it look like this part would be hard to make look good if you had to build it from multiple parts. Sprue B comprises mostly wheels, and the parts for the regular infantry carrying truck body. I'm sure that part has an actual name, but you'll be surprised to know that I don't know what it is. But I do quite like that the option to build that is included. All of these parts are quite nice. They're well detailed, very neatly moulded, and have minimal mould lines. There's not really a whole lot to say about these parts other than they look pretty good. Most of these will be going in my bits box because I'm only building the Katyusha version of the truck. Sprue C is where we find the frame and cab floor of the vehicle along with all the rocket railings. There are 8 of these rails. The rocket is moulded onto them and they look nice and neat. There is also this driver figure. This is, in my opinion, the weakest part of the kit. The detailing on this guy is a little bit soft. He won't be very visible in the vehicle though, so I guess it doesn't really matter. The bottom of the truck's frame has some minor detailing. This will add some realism when looking at the model from low angles. The cab interior also has some minor detailing, just to give it a little something, even though it won't really be visible at all. And the grille part here, which I held upside down, also looks quite neat. And finally, Sprue D, which contains all the parts needed to make the frame that holds the rocket launcher rails. There's a lot of bars and poles and bits of pieces here. It's all just as neat as the previous sprues. All of the parts are here, and as best I can tell, there are no moulding errors. Before we turn these parts into a Katyusha, let's have a look at this decal sheet. As with all Rubicon decal sheets, it comes with a protective plastic packaging, which I think is pretty good. There are markings here suitable for all kinds of Allied trucks, not just this Studebaker. There's markings for American, British, Polish, and Soviet trucks. I can see this decal sheet being quite handy to have in the future. If you want a more in-depth look at this decal sheet, check out Rubicon's unboxing video for their Deuce and a Half model. It shares this decal sheet with the Katyusha. I will link that video in the description. According to the instructions, the first step is to assemble the driver and put him into the cab. I'm not going to be using the driver in this case, so I skip ahead to the third step, which is more or less just building the entire base truck. I start by gluing the steering wheel into the cab floor part. Looks very steering wheely. Can't ask for much more than that. I then glue the cab to the cab floor part. If you plan on doing more detailed painting on the interior of the cab, I would leave this unglued until you've finished that painting. But since I'm going to have the blast shield over the windshield anyway, it didn't seem worth the effort to me. You might need to apply some pressure while the glue bonds to prevent gaps. The cab assembly can then be glued to the frame. This has a kind of keying to ensure it goes together correctly, which is always helpful for this kind of thing. You can see it here. This prevents the part from moving back and forth along the frame. Again, applying pressure here should ensure that there are no unwanted gaps. Next come the front grille and headlights. This goes into place very easily. The cab floor part ensures this sits right. Now we need some wheels. The instructions say that there are specific wheels for different parts of the truck. I'm not sure their placement is actually that important, but what I like to do in these situations is set out all the wheels next to the model according to where they should go. All of these parts needed cleaning up, and doing this helps me keep track of them while I do that. The wheels do have mold lines, but they're very tiny, so these parts don't really need a whole lot of cleanup. There is a sort of flat spot on each wheel. This represents the point of the wheel that contacts the ground. This is done to give the illusion that the vehicle has some weight to it, and I think it's a nice little touch. After slicing the sprue gate remains off the wheels with a knife, I used an emery board to roughly remove the mold lines. I figured this might leave more of a scratchy, used tyre look to these parts. I then glued the sets of dual wheels together. There is keying here, so you get the flat spots on these properly aligned with each other. It's just a matter of putting them together and twisting until the parts slot together and lock in place, though they don't actually lock per se. Then, the wheels can be glued to the axle parts. This is about as simple as you would expect. There is keying on these parts to ensure that the flat spots are oriented towards the ground, though if you tried, you could easily attach these parts wrong, so probably try to avoid doing that. Once they're all in place, they look really good. Next, I attach the front bumper. This is fairly simple. The two hook-like things that curl backwards should be on the top of this part. There's an optional winch that would be placed between this bumper and the rest of the truck, but I've decided not to add that. So that's the base truck completed, and it is now time to choose what to put on the truck. I've decided to build this as only a Katyusha. If you wanted to, it would be pretty easy to magnetize both the Katyusha assembly and the cargo and infantry carrying body thing, if you had appropriately thin magnets. To magnetize the blast shield that goes over the cab, you will need some fairly thin magnets, or a sliver of metal or something. I've decided not to go to that effort. I might need trucks to haul my Soviet infantry around later, but I can always pick up more trucks specifically for that purpose. I would prefer them to have a covered cargo and passenger area, and this kit doesn't include the top for that, only the ends. Now to assemble the part that makes this a Katyusha, the rocket launcher. I start as the instructions suggest, by assembling the rocket rails. There's a text box here that says "Attention" in red, so I paid attention. It says that while each rail looks the same, they have minor differences. Pay attention to the numbers on each part as you cut them from the sprue. I would suggest cutting them from the sprue one at a time, cleaning the part up, and then gluing it to the rest of the assembly. The parts do go together quite easily. It's just a little time consuming to clean them all up. I like that the rockets are already mounted to the rails. It would have been even more time consuming if these were separate parts. This thing here is all of the fin parts for the rockets. This big block part is spaced such that it will fit on the rockets without any modification. It does obviously have the part joining them all together though, which in my opinion would look kind of ugly. You could cut them down into sets of two, an upper and lower set of fins which would eliminate the horizontal joining part, and maybe look slightly better, or you can do it the hardest way as I've done, and glue them on as individual sets of fins. I cut them off the frame part, cleaned them up as best I could, and then glued them into place. It can take a little bit of fiddling to get these on nice and straight, but I got there eventually. It was time consuming, but I felt it would produce the best looking result. It is nice that they've included a way to get these fins on very quickly. Next, I turned this jumble of parts into the rack for the rocket launcher. There's probably a nice rack joke around here somewhere, which, as you know, is quite original. Pay attention to the instructions for this. I'll point out again that they've color-coded the parts here, which is quite helpful. It might be a bit tricky to follow how I've built this. I didn't film it all that well. This assembly is pretty fiddly to get together all at once, but it wasn't super hard. Just take your time with it and be patient. The very bottom part, whatever you might call that, can be left unglued to allow that part to elevate and depress, but I don't really feel a need for such a feature. I didn't glue that part in place yet though. I'll do that later. At this point, I test fit the rocket railing and rack assemblies together, just to be certain they will go together later with no hassle. The instructions do mention this, but test fitting parts should be habit anyway. Next, I installed a rack elevation thing. I didn't film it, but I clipped the bottom part of this pole piece off so it would better fit into the round hole. I also add glue to the articulation point at this time, and I adjust the elevation of the part to where I want it. You can sit the truck next to the rack to get an idea of how it will end up looking. I then add this manual elevation control handle part. This was a bit fiddly to get on nice and straight. The truck's mudguard will help hold this part in place, so in hindsight I would wait until later to add this part. I don't know what you would call this mudguard part. I'll refer to it as the frame. I attached the spare tyre to this raised nub here. If you look closely, you can see there are 2 bolts in the spare wheel. Align these with the frame. These are what is holding the wheel on. Also glue. Next comes the handle for adjusting the traverse of the rocket launcher. This is easily glued into the slot on the side of the frame part. Then I glue the frame part to the rear of the truck. This is pretty easy. There's a pin at the front to guide positioning. You might need to apply a little bit of pressure to get the parts to click together. The hole here at the rear of both the frame and the rest of the truck should line up perfectly. This hole is the mounting point for the launcher frame, which we will attach next. I'm obviously gluing this into place, but there is a stopper you can glue to the underside of this pin to secure the part into place while still allowing the part to move from side to side. Once the launcher frame is on, adjust the traverse to taste. Next, I glue the blast shield onto the cab. Getting this slightly off-center would be okay because good strong Soviet construction, but do try to get it close to centered. I had to apply pressure to this while the glue dried, because the part wants to flex up and off the cab roof just a little bit. And that's about it. Next, I test fit the rockets and they fit very nicely indeed. I'm going to leave these rails off until the model is painted, because I think it will be easier that way. There's a lot of stuff to get paint on in that frame. And so that's one 28mm scale plastic BM-13 Katyusha by Rubicon Models completed. I really like this kit a lot. I think Katyushas are cool and this is the first model of one I've ever had. I know Warlord makes a resin and metal Katyusha, but I can imagine those rocket rails and the rack to be quite frustrating to work with in either resin or metal. I'll take plastic any day. In the absence of another Katyusha for comparison, here's Mortimer again. He's a bolt-action 28mm scale figure. He stands about 32mm tall, including his base. This should give you some idea of how this model scales with bolt-action infantry. I actually think the design of the Studebaker truck itself is a little bit ugly. It's got an odd, tall and narrow appearance that doesn't appeal to me much. That's not to say this model is ugly. It's really nice and it looks great. It's just the design of the Studebaker truck that I don't really care for. At any rate, this seems to me to be a reasonably accurate representation of a Katyusha launcher on a Studebaker truck. If it was up to me, this would be mounted on the GAZ or GAZ truck, that common Soviet truck from the war that I often see Katyushas mounted to. That's not really a big concern to me though. The main point of this truck is the badass rocket launcher system, and that looks really cool, and I'm very happy with it. The model went together quite easily, and I didn't have any real problems putting it together. The frame for the launcher was probably the trickiest part. It wasn't too hard though, and the color coding in the instructions really helped. It did take a little while to put together, mostly because I chose to give each rocket individual fin sets. Cleaning all of those up took a good chunk of time, but I think it was worth it. I like that you can actually build 2 versions of this truck. The only problem is that you only get one spare wheel, and it goes in different positions for different truck types. Fortunately, with a spare wheel, you can justify its absence by saying it has already been used. In conclusion, this is a really cool model, and it will make a great addition to my Soviet force for bolt action. I wish I could have used the Gwar song, Stalin's Organs, for this video, but I don't have permission and that would be wrong. It would have been cool, but oh well. What do you guys think about this Rubicon Models Katyusha? Do you plan to get one? Have you built one already? Or maybe you have the Warlord metal and resin version. If so, what do you think of that? Let me know in the comments below, along with any other comments, questions or suggestions you might have. If you liked this video, you can indicate such by clicking the thumbs up button. If you thought it was garbage, thumbs down. If you feel so inclined, it would be awesome if you did things like sharing this video with anyone who might find it helpful or interesting. And if you've not done so already, subscribe to be kept informed of when I upload new videos. If you really like the videos I make, and you want to see them a little earlier than everyone else, please consider helping to support the channel via Patreon, at patreon.com/Herberterpaderp. Click the Patreon logo on screen now or the link in the description. I shall return soon, so until then, happy modelling and thanks for watching. Farewell.